So welcome to our second session in human design. And today we're discussing the head and the ajna. So if you're following on from the first video, I mentioned at the end that we're going to talk about the different qualities and aspects of the head and ajna. So in today's session, we'll talk about the head being open, defined. We'll look at all the gates. And the idea of this is that at the end of this, after 2 years, you'll basically be able to, I'm just going to, there's Jonna, hi. You'll be able to watch all the videos, and at the end of it, you'll basically have a whole human design course. That's the focus. So you can learn everything about human design without having taken a course, because this will become your course in a sense. Okay, perfect. So I'm going to do a screen share. And then I'm also just going to go into a full screen mode here. So I encourage you guys, if you do have your charts with you, just to have your charts handy, then you can actually see what I'm referring to in your particular chart. And also with regards to, I'm just going to minimize my video and put on the side. And with regards to making your notes, etc., as you need to. So talking about the head and the ajna, and why I've decided to start here is that the head and the ajna are all about like how you think and how you process information. So remember, human design is very binary, okay? And when I say binary, I mean it as in like, if we were to open up a plug and look at the circuitry of that plug, and we went like, oh, it's a circuit of how the plug goes together. That's exactly what we're doing here for your energy. We're opening you up and looking at your energy. The decisions you make and how you are, etc., is not what this is about. So we're looking at the processes, like what conductors connecting to which one, and how those circuits connecting, and how do they click. And so understanding the centers that we have, and you can see the head and the ajna, those are centers. That's what we call the centers. It's important because if you're defined in a center, so defined means that the center is a solid color. The other centers around you who are open, so if your center is open, it would be white. Basically, you become conditioned by those who are defined. So those who are defined impact you. They impact how you think, how you feel, your thoughts. So defined centers have very fixed traits and functions. I've got a defined head and ajna. So I know that, my thought processes are a very specific way. I can't change my mind easily. We're someone who's more open-minded, more open. Their centers are open. They have qualities that are intermittent. There's a coming and going depending on what other designs are around. So if we look a little bit further into this and we say, okay, well, let's talk about the head center. And we start here and we say, here are 3 different types of heads on the screen. And the first one is a defined space. And you can see that it's solid, it's colored in. We're not worrying about the gates at the moment. The gates are the numbers. So whether they are highlighted in black or white, it doesn't matter at this point. So this is defined head, the first one. The middle one is open. And the third one's been included because it's completely open. There are no gates defined. So an open head is open-minded. They're creative, new ideas, very busy up there. A defined space is inspiring to other people. And an open head with no gates active is very difficult for this individual to know what one thing is more important or interesting than the other. So if you have a completely open head with no gates active, as in this third example here on the right-hand side, it is a struggle. It's a struggle to know. It's almost like a pressure to think is too much for this individual. And for clients that I've worked with that have this, they discuss like saying, they almost feel that if they think too much, they go a little bit crazy and they're not sure, like, should they act on this? Shouldn't they act on it? And the more they think, the more pressure they feel in that space. You can see here, for a defined space, we have about 30% of the data that's available in human design that is said of those who've entered charts, 30% of people have defined space, 70% are open. So that's quite interesting. If 70% of the population are open and 30% are defined, 30% of the population are influencing 70% of the population, because that's what defined spaces do. We influence. And the open spaces become influenced, they become conditioned, they take in that inspiration. So the head center here, it's about the mental pressure, it's about inspiration, it's about questions, doubts, confusion. The head stimulates imagination, it initiates thoughts, it's our mode of thinking. And it's not a center that's a motorized center. So it doesn't lead to action, which is quite interesting. So its process is about thinking rather than acting. So it's quite important where you go back into your chart, you find where your authority is, you find where that place where you're making decisions from the right space is, and you act on that space. So if I go and I look here, okay, well, what's going on in the head? You know, what gates are active and what do the gates tell me about how I'm going to be thinking? Because the gates are a filtering system. It's important that we understand the gates because we can almost understand how we think. So if you have in your chart, if you have a look at your chart now, if you have gate 64 active, 64 is the gate of confusion. It's about the gate that requires completion. It's quite abstract because it wants to make sense of the past. It wants to try and resolve chaos and confusion. It asks, what's this all about? What are the lessons? Why? And it questions through this. So it cycles through that. And that's what 64 does. It has this like cycling action about it. What are the lessons? Why? How does it work? And so often we experience individuals where we're like, well, why don't they really ask any questions about the past? Why aren't they trying to resolve? Or why don't they reflect on the lessons in their life? They don't reflect on that lesson necessarily because they don't have this gate active. So they're not built to have this conductor inside of their energy system. You've got to think of yourself as an electrical circuit. Your energy and these different circuit boards are talking to each other. If we look at 61, 61 is about inner truth. It's a gate of mystery. And it's also very mutative. So it's pressure to know something, to understand the mysteries, to know the unknowable. It's also the energy that wants the wise in life. It's very much what I always call an ascending path of awareness, because in the ascending, it's not descending in energy. Descending in energy would go down to the base. This goes down to it goes up through the crown. And it wants to know, it wants to understand, it wants to look up, it wants to see the big picture. It's also a gate of channeling. So you find individuals who have this gate can often be those who like pick up like messages and who communicate with animals or pick up from energies from spirits. You'll find that. So other people who are like, well, you know, I don't quite get it. Okay, talking to animals or plants or connecting with that energy is not really a thing, or channeling, is this like, are they just talking shit? Well, if you've got this gate active, it's not really, because it's a very mysterious gate. It's also a very esoteric aspect, but it's also about the wise. It also wants the answers. It's interested. It wants to see the picture. Now, not to get confused with gate 63, because gate 63 wants to see the patterns. It wants logic. There's a little bit of a difference. It's a gate that says, I'm not so sure if I believe you. Let me push to find some answers. If I go to, if I go to gate 63, sorry, I got a little bit lost there. That's about, as I was saying, it's about the patterns that look through it, looks for a logical pattern. It questions, doesn't accept. It wants to find the answers from those around them. It will ask. It will be like, why do we have to just accept the way things are? Why does it have to be like this? And it pushes. It wants to know. It sees the doubt. It wants that. It needs it. I also find that with this gate, it asks a lot of questions. It wants to know. You find individuals who question a lot. Somebody, if you're at dinner or you're with friends and someone's asking you like quite a lot of questions, or you're someone who questions people a lot, you check if you've got this gate, because this gate does do that. It asks, it pushes, it's curious. And then when we look at the space and we say, well, okay, well, we've got 3 gates here. We've got a space that is open. What does that mean? Well, in a nutshell, a lot of the space is about thinking about things that don't really matter to you. So be careful of that, because thinking about things that don't matter is kind of like a hobby for this open space. But remember too, that on the plus side, you're very open-minded. Individuals with this open space, they need to be activated. They need to be inspired. They like people that inspire them. They like people that activate them, that they're looking for a good conversation. They want to go out and be stimulated. When they want to work out how things work or see, they want to go and look and experience, going to shows, experiencing, seeing, chatting, activated. They want to be activated. But, be aware of the not self thoughts in this space if you have it open. Those not self thoughts and those questions, they steer you away from your decision-making process. There's also mental anxiety here, which will contribute to you looking to somebody else to help solve your questions, or, to give you the answers that you're looking for. Your space is open. You can become conditioned. You can become conditioned to believe and think in a certain way when you're growing up. If you didn't get the right and proper, you could say, like mental conditioning and sort of encouragement from your parents with the space open, you can believe that you're not good enough. You can believe that you're ugly, that you struggle, and it's hard to kind of get out of this. I have clients who have a space open here with the Ajna, and they've got amazing activations in their chart, but they can't get out of their head because it's just so hard. They're just stuck in their head and they just can't get out of it. So in human design, what we're wanting to do is actually take you out of your head. It's another route out of the mind. And it says, like, don't get stuck in the mind. Look at to other places inside of your energy system to make your decision from. Understand where those come from, because, with the space open, you can also want to avoid intellectual pursuits because it's intimidating, or you throw yourself into one mystery after the next. You become lost in doubt and confusion, and you let yourself become conditioned, just believing what everyone else believes around you and not really questioning it, especially if you don't have the gates that question. So it's quite important to detach from your thoughts, trust your authority, that being in your chart, remembering your authority. If you're a generator, is your sacral. If you're a projector, it might be splenic, it might be emotional, understanding what that means and understanding how to access that. If your authority is your sacral, that means you need to understand how you feel about something, getting out of the head and into the body. If your space is defined, we see 30% of the data that we have accumulated have a defined space. If you have a defined head, you will have a defined ajna. It's just how that formula works in human design. And now with this, you basically have a design, and I can speak for myself, so I'm not speaking on anyone else's behalf, is that when your mind is made up, it's made up. I always say, like, don't put a thought in my head because you can't get it out. Like, once I've decided it's a great thought, or my mind is made up in a certain way. And I'm not that I'm hard-headed, but you can't change my mind easily when I believe something. I can't just be brainwashed by what other people think or believe. Now, remember, these are not absolutes. It doesn't mean because you have an open head, you can be brainwashed. What you need to be careful of is being stuck and getting caught up in other people's ideas. But with a defined space, there's a very fixed way of thinking. You solve problems in a very fixed and linear way. Now, the themes of the gates for defined spaces become the source and subject of the inspiration that other people can access. The defined space puts out an energy to the undefined spaces, and it puts them under pressure to think. Because the space is defined, coming into your space, and suddenly you're activated by that. Having an idea or a thought doesn't lead to an action as an absolute, because therefore I think does not mean therefore I act. The defined spaces motivate. There's an opportunity that presents itself where they can share their insights and they can share their understanding of stuff. And the open spaces are interested and they're curious to be there. The defined spaces also have confusion, doubt, but they're very uplifting. They're very inspiring. They're very empowering. One thing that Ra, the founder of Human Design, said, if you want to have a really good dinner party, make sure you have at least one person at the table who's defined. And that's because the defined space won't let you loop a conversation. They will bring a new topic into the conversation. They'll throw something out which will challenge the open spaces and create their continuity and flow. And it's actually very true. What becomes very difficult for a defined space is that it's trying to solve too many problems and find iterations. Is I can see for myself, if I'm given if I'm given a problem, I can find a solution. I can maybe find two or so alternatives, but I can't see out of the box further, which is why I need the open space to come and help me here. Let me see the bigger picture because I'm getting a little bit stuck in this. Now, if you're totally open, you've got no gates active, this is very stressful. And individuals who have this, really, they do find it hard to know, is this thought more important than this thought? Is this more interesting than that's more interesting? So imagine you're reading something and you're doing something and you have an interest, and suddenly that interest just kind of takes you away and you're thinking, oh my word, am I really into this? Is this something I really like? Well, I find this just as inspiring as that. It becomes really confusing. So there's no consistent way of having a way to think or to focus on something. And so this space can often feel quite afraid of thinking. And there's a pressure to think and find an answer. And they'll often give their authority away to others to find an answer. Few individuals I know who have a space open like this, I often find them going to, looking at astrology, going to fortune tellers, asking other people what their thoughts are, what their opinions are, getting a lot of inputs and not trusting how they feel. Ultimately, here we're here to learn to trust your own instinct, not to give it away. How do you feel? And what decisions do you want to make? And do you feel that's right for you? Get out of the head, get into the feeling aspect of what it is. They're also very sensitive to what people are thinking. I noticed the open head, even if you have gates defined, there's a sensitivity to what people are thinking. It's almost like you can pick up their thoughts and you can sense into the individual. So you'll be having a conversation, you'll pick up stuff, and that's absolutely normal because that's how that functions. If we look at the Ajna is what we would say in the third eye, would cover this kind of aspect of the face. And the Ajna is about the head of details. It's looking at, names, memory, data, learning style. If it's defined, it's a bit like having a hard drive that's plugged into the computer. Everything gets backed up onto it. If it's open, it allows you to see many different sides of a topic. It allows you to take something and turn it around. It also has a very distinct learning style. Now, what's quite interesting is if you've got an open head and an open Ajna, and I was sitting with you and having a conversation, and we were looking at a young child's chart, and you were saying, well, what kind of education would be best for this child? I would advise that the child has a more alternative education. They go to a Montessori school. They don't have to wear shoes. They can be more free. They can wear whatever they want. They can learn outside. They can learn inside. They're very tactile. You teach them lots of different things. When you have a defined head and defined ajna, like I do, it works very well in structure, learning environments. Like, I want to learn something, I need to go to university, I need to do this course. The open space will be like, you can learn it anywhere. You can pick up that style, you can, but that's because that space, that's how you learn. This is how I learn. I learn in a very structured, very distinct way. But I need the open space, just as the open needs the defined, in order to balance those systems energetically and bring forward new concepts. Now, with the Ajna Center, you can see in the example that if the space is defined, we're looking at about 47% of individuals of the data, and 53% have an open space. So the Ajna Center is about mental consciousness. It's about conceptualizing, interpreting answers as opinions. It's about concepts and theories. The head and the ajna function together as the mind. So these two aspects, they need each other. There's a conversation happening here. They're almost sort of separate from, as you reach the throat in the body graph and you head down, these are sort of separate functions. The ajna is the processing hub. And like the head, the ajna is the interpreter. It cannot manifest. It's about interpreting information. A decision that's made mentally often has a far longer shelf life than what it needs to. It can be mulled over until right at the end. So mental-based decisions, I mean, we use our mind to work out stuff, but being trapped in that web of I only make a decision from my mind, it's a very dangerous place to be, because these centers are meant to interpret, they're meant to research, they're meant to conceptualize, weigh up, understand. That's what they're meant to do in order for you to feel that decision coming through. If we look at the gates here, and we have gate 47, 47 is all about the gate of realization. It's about making sense of confusion. There's a mental anxiety with this gate. If you have this gate active, you might feel that life is oppressive, that life is futile, that you can't make sense of sometimes the confusion that gets thrown to you. And you sit and you're like, oh, it feels like it's too much. It's also a gate that's an ascending gate. So it wants to look up, it wants to have a revelation, it wants to have an esoteric experience, it wants to have what's real and relevant to you. It's also a fear center as well. So the fear of pointlessness, of uselessness, and whether that's your own uselessness, the fear of being useless, or the uselessness of just whatever it is at the topic that it's focusing on. Remember here, the experience you have here is based on your filtering system. The gates filter and create that experience for you. Gate 24, the gate of rationalization. It's knowing the answer in a moment. It's this mental anxiety here again. So you've got to watch this too. So if you're looking at a client's chart and you see that a client has 47 and they have 24, you would see a lot of mental anxiety in the individual. And here, this mental anxiety is that you won't know the answer, that the inspiration won't come, and that you won't be able to explain your knowing. And you think about things and you ponder them and you entertain them in different ways, and they suddenly become a bit clearer. This can take a while. But in order for you to understand things, one needs to be patient. You need to turn things around. You need to take time to think about them. You need to ponder them. You need to know that the answers will come. If you have this gate active, it can also cause you to fear that, will this happen? Will it be okay? Creating more mental anxiety. There's also fear of ignorance here. I specifically put this example of an open space here with 24 active, because if an individual in your chart, you had just this active, you can feel very unsure about yourself, because with the open ajna, you can often struggle to hold on to detail and information, which will make you feel stupid. And then with 24, it's highlighted. It makes you feel worse. And you're like, oh my gosh, I can't remember anything. Now I feel anxious. I don't know how to explain this. Instead of taking a moment, stepping back and knowing that you will understand it, you just need to be patient with it. But watch the fear gates here. The fear gates are very interesting because the fear starts in the mind and it then moves into the vehicle of the body. If we look at 4, 4 is about the gate of formalization. It wants to formulate a logical answer. Mental anxiety again, that you won't find the order in your life, that you'll always be in chaos and you need to find an answer and give an answer. And so when someone asks you a question, you need to know the answer. It can be very stressful to have this because it drives you to want to find the answers, but not just one answer, the answer. But here it's about the possibilities. It's about that there are many possibilities, not also just one answer. So be kind to yourself here and know that when you start looking for an answer, there has to be the answer to this, whether it's my life or my direction or why this isn't working. This mental chaos that you find yourself and need to formalize this. The fear of chaos. I don't want this chaos, so I'm trying to make sense of this. Watch what 4 is doing in this space to your thought process. And then we go to 11. 11 is about having ideas. 11 always feels like this little beacon, and it's kind of got this radio transmitter and reminds me of, I think it was Oasis, one of their interviews they were talking about at the time when Blur brought out a song and they had a very similar song going on. And, they talked about there's this space where, you kind of hear it and there's a soundscape and you bring these ideas and so this music from this place. And I firmly believe that 11, it resonates out into those different frequencies. Like, why is it that many people will write a similar book at the same time, but not knowing each other? And we argue about artistic and creative license. One person on this side of the world is creating a similar sculpture to another. Where does that come from? It's a collective consciousness. 11 is about tapping into that. It's about accessing that space, and suddenly you get ideas, you find solutions, you get thoughts that come into your head. And this is very much an ideas journal focus. Have an ideas journal, write it down, get these ideas to come forward, because the ideas that you might be having might be for the future. You're thinking about your logo for 10 years time when you have your property company, or you're thinking about a painting you want to draw, but it's not now. Write it down, because these are the ideas for your future. They come into your head for no reason, but they're ideas about what's relevant now and to be acted upon. I have 11, and I found it interesting that it said it had a fear of darkness, because for many, many, many years, I was very afraid of dark and of being in the dark. And that was both metaphorically and physically. Like, even when I was small, darkness scares me. And sometimes at night when it's very, very dark and I look out, I feel unsettled by the darkness. But as I get older, I'm more comfortable with it. So if you have a child and the child has 11 and the child needs a night light, or they want the passage light left on, have some compassion for that, because 11 is also afraid of the dark, both physically and metaphorically. 43 is about this breakthrough, this gate of insight. It's perspectives. It's about wanting to say, like, and knowing. It's really a gate of knowing. Like, how do you know something? You just know it, right? And if you don't have this gate, I know that you will still feel that sense of like, because you know. But individuals with this gate, they know things. They know like whether something works or not, but it's a different kind of knowing, because they see things in a very certain way. And that way is obvious to them. And it's almost like their ideas are quite weird. And it's hard for them to articulate it and bring it forward, because they almost need to be recognized and invited to say these things before they say them, because there's this fear of rejection that can take place in them actually sharing what they have to share. And I have clients with this gate, and it's like, they often say, you know, but I know what I've got to say is like, it's kind of out of the box and it's strange. And I'm like, well, we want to hear it. We want to know. And so there's a fear of rejection with 43. The individual fears being rejected. It's a very real thing because they have very unique opinions and insights. But what is the collective without the sharing? 17, it's about following. It's the gate of opinions. It's the fear of challenge. So having opinions that are based on facts and creating evidence for what is true, finding that information and basing it on fact. So that's quite important. 17 wants to know that it can back it up by fact. You often find someone like, yeah, but do you have a fact for that? Or, you know, is there any proof of this? When you hear that a lot, you're like, oh, okay, that's 17 asking. That's 17 wanting to know, can you prove this? And it's not just, this is what you think, I need to see the proof. So if you had the combination of 43 and 17, you would have someone that says like, sure, I know this because I know it. And then they'll also be driven to find the facts to prove it and to back it up. When the space is completely open, we can see 53% of individuals are undefined. It's a space that goes, where are my keys? Where did I park? Sorry, I don't know. Is it in my pocket? What's happened? It's very much that. But because it's an open space, it's just, there's endless opportunity and possibility. So if you think that you're forgetting things, that you need to take medication to keep your mind sharp and that you're slowly losing it and you're only 40, you're not losing it. It's absolutely, if you've got the space open, don't be too hard on yourself. Just know that you need to create more structure around you as to how things are structured, because your mind is so open, it's so free. The beautiful thing with this is if you can free your mind further, if you can set yourself free. And what does it mean by freeing your mind? It's like not allowing yourself to get stuck in those old conditioning patterns, to discern what concepts have value to you, what questions do you value, who you are, your truth. Except that your mind operates in a very inconsistent way. Know that if we take an aspect and we put that problem into the space, you're going to find iterations. I always say, I imagine the space to be when I'm looking through a kaleidoscope, and you know, you get those beautiful kaleidoscopes that have those little balls at the end, and they're full of sand and little stones, and you turn them, and there's just like these beautiful geometric patterns that take place. This is what your open space looks like. It is so beautiful. You can be intellectually stimulated, so creative, but don't allow yourself to get caught up and stuck in worrying about other people's problems, trying to solve things, getting ideas and opinions that are not yours. Have your own thoughts, discern what's good for you. And also acceptance that your mind operates in a bit of a different way. You don't think like a defined space, which is exactly what you're meant to do. When you're defined, 47% defined, there's not much you can say that can change the mind of a defined space. But the defined space here, it holds on to detail, names, dates, places, information, it processes it. I always say, if you ever define Ajna and you feel as though your memory is starting to go and you're forgetting things, really, you need to take a step back. You're under tremendous mental pressure and you take some time out. A defined space shouldn't glitch. Defined space, when it walks out, it knows where it's parked, know where your keys are. If you're finding that you're glitching, is what I call it, you need some time off. You shouldn't glitch. You're not an open space in that way. And that also shows you under tremendous pressure. The hard drive is struggling to back up. Your mind is there to process data. Your creativity is always on. The mental activity doesn't stop. Meditation Mindfulness, very important for this defined space. Learn to disengage from your thought, but it's different because the space is on. The thought process is continual, and you can get stuck in listening to the noise in that space. Can you create distance from the noise? Learn to control the mind. Know that you are stubborn, that you're headstrong, you're obsessive. These are qualities of this space, but there's nothing wrong with that. Those are just aspects of this. No gates open, completely open. Also, very rare. I have only had one client out of the almost 100 readings I've done with an open ajna. And without that, you can find that there's this great pleasure the space takes in contemplating a wide variety of theories, concepts, and insights. And it needs to also learn to recognize a good thought and a concept and to be stimulated. It helps them move to the next level. It's also very practical that it helps others to see through ways of the not self and the mind and how to find their purpose and path. They're very unique to have the space open. They're very unique individuals in how they view things and how they're also able to progress both on different lines of development as they move themselves up through these levels. So that's the end of the head, the crown, and the ajna. And just wanted to say, in terms of the closing, I didn't want this to be like a long lecture where you start kind of having to watch this for hours and making all these notes. I wanted to be very sort of straightforward and direct that, when we find this information and we start to learn about human design, what's quite important is to have and understand the language of it, understand how the sentence function in small bits of information. And if you can just take this information we've looked at now, compared to the chart, your chart, the gates you have active and what that means to you and how you make decisions and how you process, you're better able to understand yourself from an energy sort of circuitry point of view when you see your energy as quite binary in its beingness. So I always allow for that to, I'm just going to stop my screen share for you to have a little bit of a Q&A. You can ask questions, you can put things into the chat. I'm happy to answer, so feel free to share your inputs. Thank you. And also no pressure. Everyone's silent, it's okay. So you can just tell me. No, the black number, Simone is asking if it's an open. No, it's not open. Those are what we call, I'm just going to say active. They're active aspects of your chart, which are processing. So that space is using those as like little filtering, processing aspects. When we dive deeper into the chart, as we go through this over a period, I'll also explain as we advance through this, because it does get quite advanced, where we talk about, the what we call like hanging gates and whether they're dormant or not, but that will come at a later stage. An open gate, we don't really say it's that it's open. We just would say that the ones that are white aren't active. So they are not qualities in which you possess. So if, say, for instance, the one was about asking questions and diving deeper and you didn't have that open, you wouldn't be inclined to kind of interrogate an individual or ask too many questions. I also don't have one of those that ask a lot of questions of those gates, where other friends and family have that, and they'll tend to ask more questions too. They want to know, where did you study? What did you do? How did you do it? Those gates are what activate that questioning. Yeah, and exactly as you say in the chat, the black is active. So those will be ones you're aware of. Also in the chart, it gets a little bit more advanced because you've got the design and the personality in your graph. So, there's the conscious and the unconscious aspects, which we'll also go into at a later stage. Well, you see, in terms of Simone's also asking about, like, what ones does the white want to be activated? in a way, because it's a dormant aspect, it's not going to be activated. So, but what will happen is, let's say I have a 4 in the ajna active, and my friend has, I'm just looking here, has 63. Okay. And we get together and we chat. We've now formed a channel of connection. And so we will like really connect in that channel, and there'll be a shared connection between us. And that's what helps us to connect to people. So when we say we connect and we click, that's the connecting and the clicking. We're clicking because our gates are seeing each other, and we're connecting because the channels are making a flow between it. And that's what creates connection ultimately. So Simone's also asking in the chat work, will our chart change over time? It's a good question, because what we do have is, like our astrological chart, we do get shifts. So it transits, and you can also look at your current transit chart. So I also do that. I can say to you, at the moment you're transiting, this will be your year for you in your solar return, and this is how you will experience certain things. So yes, certain gates and aspects of your chart will be turned on and off. Remembering that your base is your base, but you will experience intermittent experiences of coming and going. It is very interesting to look at actually a transit chart. It's good to look at that, especially if you're going through a lot of stuff and you might be kind of questioning what's going on with you, or why you're feeling a certain way, you're feeling a bit different. You might find that it could be your transit chart as well that's affecting. Any other questions? But also no pressure.
Hi, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, Wolf.
It's Wolf.
Yeah, I'm going to turn it up. Yep.
On that statement you just made about transition through life when your chart changes slightly or becomes active and inactive, is it then the same sort of base as you say? So, for example, if you have 47 and 56 active throughout stages in your life, 47 would be, for argument's sake, more active than 56 or something. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, it depends on how you're transiting. So different aspects of your chart will become activated, just like when through your astrological chart, you'll move through and you'll have your chart will turn. And like, for instance, I'm Scorpio, but as I transition through, I become Sagittarius and I become more Capricorn. And that's about my life journey through my chart. And my different houses will shift a bit. So your chart will shift. Your base will always be your base, but you will experience energy activations that will have qualities of the different aspects that aren't necessarily active in your chart. Else have any questions? Cool. Then we'll just leave the session at that. And yeah, if anything comes up at a later stage, or if you're watching this video and you want to post any questions in the comments or say anything, you're most welcome to. And remember also, I always say with human design that like these experiences and insights that I share are never absolute, right? They're relative to the research I've done, my understanding of the science, the charts I've read, the conversations that I've had, the experiences I've applied to the science myself. So you might be watching this video, or you might have had slightly different experiences. And I encourage you to share those, because that's exactly what it's about. You know, we learn through community, we learn through sharing, and we learn to understand each other. And that's the process of the journey of life. So thank you so much for being here. And I look forward to our next session. Bye.